Salut French students, bienvenue au vidéo 4 du chapitre 5. So you remember last week in video 3 you were learning all about le passé composé avec être. So we're going to take just a quick moment just to review the form of this verb, to jog your memory, help you remember how it's formed and what it means. And then we're going to go on to looking at some time words that you would use with passé composé, whether you're using the passé composé avec être or avec avoir. Okay, so if you remember, the passé composé is a composed verb. It has two parts, the helping verb and the past participle. So the helping verb in the case of the verb aller and sortir is être. So you need to conjugate être first. So je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. So that's our full conjugation of the verb être, and we use one of those paired up with a past participle. And the past participle is just simply removing the ER ending for an ER verb and adding an E accent aigu, and the E with the accent going to the right. And that's going to be your ending, plus any agreement that you might need to make. Remember, when you conjugate a verb in passé composé avec être, you need to add agreement. You don't have to do that for verbs conjugated with avoir, just the ones conjugated with être. And if you remember in our Blackboard course, I'm just going to go take a quick peek over there. Let's see which one we're in here. Let me get in the right class. Okay, so in our class, if we go into our modules area and down to chapitre 5, you'll notice last week after I uploaded the third video, I included a graphic there for you. So this is a really great resource to study which verbs take the verb être when you conjugate them in passé composé. So as it says here, study la maison d'être, the house of être, to know which verbs are conjugated with être in the passé composé. And these are very often what we call verbs of coming and going. So all of these have something to do with some kind of motion. So partir is like leaving, arriver is coming, aller is going, mourir is leaving this world, naître is coming, tomber is going. So they all have something to do with that. So as we go through this chapter and learn this concept, it would be good to kind of fix these verbs into your head so that you know which ones are supposed to be conjugated with être. All right, so back to our slide here. Okay, so just as a reminder, remember that if you are female and you're talking about yourself and you say je suis allée, you're going to need to add an E to the end when you spell this. For pronunciation, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, but for spelling, when you write this down, you'll definitely need to make the agreement. You also need to add S endings if you are talking about a plural group of people. So if you said on est allé, if you're talking about a group, because on can mean we in certain contexts. If you're an all-female group, you would add an E. If you are an all-female, well, you would actually need the S too. So it would be the E and the S if it's an all-female plural group. If you are an all-male group or a mixed male and female group, then it would just be an S and no E. And the same thing with nous sommes allés. It's exactly the same situation. So just keep it in mind that you have to have that agreement there. All right, so from there, what we're going to move on to looking at is les expressions qui désignent le passé. And all this means is expressions that kind of mark the past or designate the past. So you see lots of expressions there that go along with time. So times of the day, hier, matin, après-midi. So I can say hier matin, yesterday morning. Hier après-midi, yesterday afternoon. Hier soir, last night or yesterday evening. I can talk about days of the week in the past. I could say lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, etc., dernier. So last Monday, etc. le week-end dernier, la semaine dernière, le mois dernier, l'année dernière. All of these mean last of that time period, but notice that there are different forms depending on whether the noun is masculine or feminine. So le weekend is masculine, therefore the adjective that describes last weekend is dernier with a silent R at the end. La semaine is feminine, so we're going to use the feminine form dernière, and that R will be pronounced. L'année is good to mention here that, yes, you might have seen also, let's put it in a different color. You might have also seen the word l'an for year, and I could say l'an dernier. L'année is really like emphasizing the duration of that year, the entire year. And that's why we use the feminine form, because when you add the accented E and the extra E to the end, it becomes a feminine form. L'an by itself would be a masculine word. L'an dernier, l'année dernière. You'd probably hear this more often, l'année dernière. You might have also heard the word soirée. Okay, so I can add that to my list really quick here. So sometimes even in English, you would hear this word to describe a party, like an evening party, a dinner party maybe. Oh, I'm going to have a soirée this weekend. So the idea of that is soir is evening. If you say soirée, it means something is going to last for the whole evening. Therefore, a party would do that. Another form you might have seen before is matinée. And this is the same concept, but with the word matin. Matin means morning. Matinée would mean like the whole morning. So we often use this word to talk about going to a movie that's early in the day, like maybe late morning or something. I'm going to see a matinee. And that would be our anglicized pronunciation of that. So it's kind of like the length of the morning, the whole morning we spend watching that movie. It's kind of interesting. We've borrowed those words in that way in English too. Okay, so I can take any of these time expressions and I can create my own sentences with these using the passé composé. So I could say, je suis allé à Londres. I went to London. And I can use any of these expressions. I could say hier soir. Okay, I went last night or yesterday evening. That's probably unlikely that I could go there and come back so fast. Je suis allé, maybe a more logical response would be le mois dernier. So last month I went to London. That seems logical. Je suis allé à Londres, let's see, lundi matin. Well, that was today, wasn't it? So that's probably unlikely too. But of course, you could choose any of these and complete the sentence. You could say, je suis revenu à Greenville. So I came back to Greenville. Let's say, hier matin, yesterday morning. That's possible, I guess. I could have arrived at the airport yesterday. I could say, hier soir. I could have arrived just last night. I could say, le weekend dernier. So I came back last weekend, and I can create a completely different sentence down here. Mon neveu est né la semaine dernière. So mon neveu, if you remember from the family expressions you learned about in chapter 4, that would be my nephew. My nephew was born, est né. So if you remember in that maison d'être chart, the very first verb at the top is naître, to be born, and that's conjugated in passé composé avec être. Oh, mon neveu est né la semaine dernière. Okay, so now I will ask you to create a sentence of your own using one of these time expressions. You can use one of the sentences that I created and just add in your own time expression, a different one from the list. You can create something that resembles one of the sentences I gave you, like je suis allé à New York la semaine dernière. You can choose whatever combination you like. So using one of those sentences as a model and choosing one of those time expressions, you can go ahead and create your own sentence. Okay, and we'll look at a few other time expressions here that go well with le passé composé. So I could say la dernière fois, the last time, récemment, recently. I can ask questions about what we did in the past and use passé composé to answer them. So, pendant combien de temps? So, for how much time? Pendant is like for how much or like during what length of time. And I can answer such a question. So maybe we can look at this one I created down here. Pendant combien de temps avez-vous étudié le français? So for how much time have you studied French? Notice, oops, that just flipped around on me. Notice that étudier is not one of the verbs that is conjugated with être in passé composé. We use avoir in this case. So you see that I have conjugated it using avoir. So avez-vous étudié? And I'm using the inverted form to ask a question. I could flip it around and it would still be fine too. I could say, pendant combien de temps vous avez étudié le français? And the intonation of my voice would also indicate a question. I could, and I can just show you how all that works. So I can do that. And another way is I could add the question marker est-ce que. Pendant combien de temps est-ce que vous avez étudié le français? So for how much time have you studied French? So I can use any of those question forms. But to keep things simple, we'll use the inverted form. Avez-vous étudié le français? And you could answer by saying, j'ai étudié le français pendant quelques jours. I've studied for a few days. J'ai étudié le français pendant 5 ans. I've studied French for 5 years, let's say. So you can fill in basically your time expression. And you could use any of the ones you see right here. You could say, j'ai étudié le français pendant quelques semaines. J'ai étudié pendant 2 minutes, 3 secondes, whichever one you think would fit best. You could say, even like this example up here, j'ai étudié pendant 2 heures, or j'ai étudié longtemps, so a long time. So I'm going to give you a chance to fill in your own time into this response right here. So I'm going to be asking you in the box that pops up, pendant combien de temps avez-vous étudié le français? And you can answer, j'ai étudié le français, and you can add in your time expression there. All right, another question we could ask is, il y a combien de temps est-ce que tu es en France? So how many, for how long or how long ago were you in France? For tu es, and we need to add in here, était, because this is actually conjugating in, or let me choose a different verb here. So tu es allé. That would be a better choice. Oops. And of course we have to add our optional E here. So, il y a combien de temps est-ce que tu es allé en France? And what that would mean is how long ago. So, il y a, like at what point in time, not the duration of time, but how long ago, how many years ago was it, for example, or how many months ago, or how many days ago. Il y a combien de temps est-ce que tu es allé en France? So, how long ago did you go? Now this time we are using être to conjugate our passé composé verb because the verb is aller, which is one of the maison d'être verbs. So we can kind of do a comparison here. Okay, so we have avez-vous étudié and tu es allé. Okay, and I could answer that question by saying je suis allé en France il y a 5 ans. So I went to France 5 years ago. Je suis allé en France il y a quelques semaines. I went to France several weeks ago, a few weeks ago. And so those are some of the options you could try there. So I'll give you a chance to now answer this question. All right, and a couple of other expressions you see here at the bottom, déjà and ne pas encore. And I think it will help to go on to the next slide where you can actually see these being used in context. Okay, so most of the time expressions you've learned in this lesson are probably going to go at the beginning or the end of a clause or sentence. A clause is just another word for sentence, a complete thought of some kind. Clauses are put together to form larger sentences. But if you look at this question right here, tu as déjà fait tes devoirs. Déjà means already. And notice if you look at the colors, I think it really helps to see the placement of this word already, the adverb already. So a fait, this is conjugated with avoir. So if I took out déjà, tu as fait tes devoirs, have you done your homework? And notice when we add this adverb already, it goes in between the two parts of the verb. So tu as fait, tu as déjà fait. And we do the same thing in English actually, so this should be a pretty easy pattern to get familiar with. Have you already done your homework? Tu as déjà fait tes devoirs? And it's pretty similar with pas encore. So, non, je n'ai, I could actually take out encore for now, or I could make it affirmative. I could say, j'ai fait mes devoirs. I did or I have done my homework. I could make it negative, and I could say, je n'ai pas fait mes devoirs. And that's pretty straightforward. We've seen that way of negating the passé composé up to now. All I'm doing with encore is just adding it to the end of ne pas. So, je n'ai pas encore, and usually this would be a liaison, the S moving into encore, starting with a vowel. Je n'ai pas encore fait. I haven't done my homework yet, or I haven't yet done my homework. So it's just adding an extra degree of description there. And then finally, if I have an expression like il y a 3 heures, I'm just tacking that on to the end of my sentence. So most of these expressions are going to come at the beginning or end of a sentence. Déjà and ne pas encore are the only ones that kind of surround that, or kind of get placed in the middle of that conjugated verb. So, j'ai fait mes devoirs il y a 3 heures. I did my homework 3 hours ago. Or I could say also, il y a 3 heures, j'ai fait mes devoirs. And we could do the same thing in English. 3 hours ago, I did my homework, or I did my homework 3 hours ago. So some of these expressions are very movable. Others have a specific fixed place in their sentence, as we see with déjà and ne pas encore. Okay, so that gives you a little bit more vocabulary to use in conjunction with le passé composé, whether it's with avoir or être. It's the same. You use these expressions in the same way. So I hope this gives you a little bit more to work with when you're communicating in passé composé. À la prochaine!